Welcome, guys. Episode 1 of Practical Female Psychology in the Sidebar series. If you're new to this, feel free to go check out the rest of the stuff. There's a playlist down in the channel's playlist options there for a guy on his red pill journey or his MAP/male action plan as we talk about it. And in this case, it's 3 guys. There's David Clare, Joseph South, and Franco. And they started off with a little bit of an introduction as to who they are and why the hell we should be listening to them. So in this case, David Clare is in his mid-40s and he's divorced. 8 years, I think. Picking up chicks, he found, applied just as well, if not more so, to a relationship. And the way he describes it as picking up different women requires learning a few basic skills which can be applied repetitively. Same shtick, different chick. In a relationship, you're picking up the same woman over and over and over again. And in that sense, he's describing how he took his normal life, applied game to it, and he found wonderful rewards coming through. Next up is Joseph South. So he's in his late 30s, single, white male, divorced. For him, he noticed that all the self-help books on dating and relationships, he had a lot of good stuff going for me, according to them. He says fashion sense, decent looks, financial independence. He's unusually loving, kind, loving, caring, loving. But as he learned from such books such as No More Mr. Nice Guy, his abundant niceness was mostly just a facade covering up the real personality of a fairly aggravated man. Again, that's those guys that are kind on the outside because they have a seething animosity on the inside. And dealing with those things is fairly important. If you know from like a pickup perspective, it's fake it till you make it. Well, the difference between red pill and his example where he used to be in pickup was this is about making it. No more faking it. Just get things done. Get yourself successful. Get where you're at. And a lot of guys are worried. They're like, I'm 25. I don't know if I have enough time. It's like, dude, he was hitting 40 before he learned to sort this stuff out. You'll be just fine. Heck, even in the married red pill space where I kind of found my wings from, there was a guy in his 60s who did it. He's been thriving like mad and he doesn't really care. So that's good. Don't worry about it. There's always time. Last guy is Franco. Mid-40s, and you'd probably consider him a bad guy and a natural. He talks about it. He's a businessman in a medical profession in a field where he's in daily contact with the darkest and most tragic aspects of human nature. I'm going to guess that means he's a contractor, but he doesn't get into too much details. Fun fact though, you're actually going to see like a lot of guys actually have this archetype within the red pill space. Anybody who's familiar with the red pill subreddit will remember a guy, Uncle Vaz. I can never pronounce his name. It's like Vasily Zaidev or whatever. Again, lawyer, working out in New York. He's in his mid-50s. He's kind of naturalized this stuff over time. And naturals and bad guys sometimes just take an interest in women and relationships and all this stuff. So it's good in that you're seeing a wide variety of men with a wide variety of experiences coming together on these very concrete points that they've learned through their own pathways. And the way he describes a natural in this one, so Franco's like, a natural is a guy who was never under the influence of the Madonna whore complex and who's been loving multiple women since he was young. Again, he didn't have to learn it in a book because he just kind of happened upon the right genetics, the right look, the right place, the right time, and the right parents to make it all work out for him, which is great, except for the fact there's no self-awareness behind it. But luckily, he managed to recover from that. And he ends off with this. Many men make an agreement to giving up their own masculinity and sexuality in exchange for sex and affection. I never did that. I just continuously went for what I wanted. In my life, there were no Madonnas and there were no whores. There was only women. I was unable to consider all the women to be whores as many men do. I simply loved all women that I had dealings with, and I'm proud of it. It's the one thing about naturals. They tend to never see the dark side of female behavior, and so they automatically kind of adopt that idea that all women are wonderful, because if you're an attractive, top-tier guy that's only ever known abundance in your life, why would you think otherwise? Because that's what they're presenting. Now, as part of their introduction, they do a teaching term here, which I refer to as the promise. I've actually taken it from most of the teaching experience I was trained with in the military, that sort of thing. The promise is a part right at the start where you let a guy know how to properly hone his expectations for what's coming in. So in this case, their promise is suggesting who is this for, who is this not for, and what are you going to get from it. In this case, who is it not for? He talks about the guys who are just starting in their red pill journey. Maybe they're very deep in the anger phase. So as he puts it, bitter, angry, or cynical men about women in general, we can't help you. Such emotions are frightening to women, such as that they actually produce a physical, instinctual response within her. Women have a biologically hardwired panic reaction to such behavior, and they will avoid men exhibiting signs of it. Absolutely true, by the way. It makes sense that you'll see a lot of guys who claim to be black-pilled or MGTOW have just this weird off-putting way to talk about things, even if they're talking about fairly mundane topics, that a girl intrinsically picks up on it as, I don't want to date that guy, he's gonna make me into a skin suit, so heck with that noise. Which always kind of throws people off too, because you'll see a lot of guys on fairly misogynistic tears, but they understand the subtext and not appearing threatening in that same manner. So where one guy can talk about how all women ain't shit, and everybody will be like, oh, that's hilarious. And another guy will say the exact same thing, and they'll be like, get that creep away from me. And this is where one of the big themes of the book kind of shines. It talks about subtext, power games, all that underlying stuff that's underneath the surface level of conversation. We always joke in the sphere how most guys are autistic. Well, not being able to pick up on this key part of language is a big tell as to whether one guy gets it or he doesn't get it. Adding on to it, he says, men who are happy in their marriages have little need for our material, although we guarantee they will read it themselves thinking, hey, that's what I do too. And we believe that even happy men will find nuggets of wisdom that will allow them to be more happy. We're talking about real wisdom that will allow men to absolutely delight in the women in their lives and teach men to take their relationships to the next level. Again, I love this part too. It really, these guys get it. It's the whole part of red pill being a toolbox. And you'll find that when you talk to people, of those who actually have an opinion on this super niche space, that people either think of it as an ideology, which is pure projection on their part, a philosophy, which is the kind of guy who doesn't actually want to do anything. He just likes talking about it and thinking about it and reading books about it. And then there's the guys who describe it as a praxeology, and that's this here as a toolbox. If you don't intuitively know the difference, a praxeology is auto mechanics, where a philosophy is more like physics. Yeah, both of them are right, but the mechanic doesn't really care why this thing works. He just cares that it does work. And if it's not useful to him, if it's not helping him fix that engine, well then he doesn't care. It's out of scope. And in the next part, they kind of give you a roadmap as to what the lives of modern men and modern women are in a nutshell. In this case, it's modern men and modern women have kind of become atomized. Physically, emotionally, never been further apart. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not, but it's good in that it brings the audience to his side, where he shows he's understood a lot of guys who have had pain, either real or perceived. He's like, yeah, I get it. People are moving apart. People aren't, getting married out of high school. I get it. Women in this case, he says, women have more liberties with life, yet still cling to the political battles against the oppressor class. Very clever way of talking about feminism, by the way. Builds a resentment that manifests as infidelity and withdrawing from the typical responsibility of fathers and husbands. This is actually a reference to something, I think it's a Rollo Tomassi article where he talks about if it wasn't Xbox, it would be something else. How guys are essentially checking out, to some extent, from traditional masculine duties. It actually was based on an old article called Bros Before Homes, where there was this guy earning $120,000 a year as a pharmacist, lived with his parents, traveled all the time, didn't have a care in the world. It wasn't that he couldn't, it's just why would I? Nothing's really working out for me. Now, I would argue that guy is the true MGTOW because he actually just went his own way. And it's kind of, it was an article that was designed to get people mad, thinking about how a really rich NEET isn't sitting there and how could he not want a woman, like a Jane Austen novel, but whatever. The point is, these kind of things are happening, not because men are deficient, not because women are all, thoughts, and because of OnlyFans or Tinder or any of that stuff. It's just a natural progression of the way things are moving right now. Men and women just aren't finding more common ground, and in this case, it's manifesting with guys checking out of their responsibilities because they don't really get a benefit in it. And say what you will about guys, shoehorning themselves into that plow horse masculinity, you're at least supposed to get good hay and a nice stable at the end of the day, not sent off to the glue factory. But for those guys, they're saying this book is for you. Next group is if women are a mystery to you, don't worry. Things are predictable. This was actually a very common critique of Royce in his first year book. I have an on-point episode on it that just came out about a week before this one. Go check it out. I'm not going to put a link in the description. It's a short playlist. Go check it out for yourself. Charles Bukowski, Jordan Peterson, Neil Strauss. I like these guys. Add some salt to cover up the bitterness of middle-aged soccer moms and put in the oven for 45 minutes. Optionally, you can take from all this stuff what you want and leave the rest. But he laments that pickup artists actually kind of broke down the art of seduction into like almost a mathematical formula. People are very predictable, people respond to the very same incentives, and at the end of the day, you're going to find that it kind of removes a bit of the mystery, that Disney fantasy out of life when you learn this stuff. I would argue that's probably as close as we're going to get to a rite of passage, realizing that people aren't made of magic and fairy dust, and people are just people, and they respond to what people respond to. And I would also argue that that's probably going to be an important life skill now, because with the advent of modern social media, with the advent of marketing, advertising, and PR to agree that's unheard of, that you need this kind of media savviness, you need to see behind the curtain, you need to see the Wizard of the Oz as just a creepy old man in order to survive in this new world, because otherwise somebody's going to tug on your emotional heartstrings to devote some goofball in power, to vote some goofball out of power, or to otherwise pay money for things you just don't need because they're like, you're not a real man unless you buy this Chevy, $3,500. Let's drop some tires in the back of it, because why aren't we all grabbing skidder tires at the back of our truck when we leave the factory for the day? You know what I mean? Anyways, bit of a distraction, bit of a tangent. He does build up some ideas here on why this is important, even though he's kind of spent the last couple pages talking about how women have it easy, women have basically won the gender war, women have more rights and liberties than men ever had, men are checking out, but even with all these benefits, women are still women. They have biological hardwirings, and it kind of prevents them from taking advantage of all these advantages they have. Again, this is the luxury good branding that I talk about in a lot of my writings. Anyways, go check my blog for that stuff. The idea here is that women don't need a man. And if women don't need a man, but they still want one, how does that make it work for you? And this is kind of the case that they're making with different language here. Nothing is needed. You're a commodity good. Men are commodity, dime a dozen, throw a rock, hit 5 of them, and they'll all thirst for her. But in the same way that they don't need a man, they want a man. They could buy 500 Walmart purses and they don't care, but they will shell out $3,000 for that Louis Vuitton clutch. Think of it that way. Your ability to have her flex on her frenemies at brunch over how great you are is going to matter more to her than how good of a guy, how stable your job is, and how great of a father you are. Those things you have to do for their own reward, because if you're doing it thinking that it'll help you secure your best life, I got news to tell you. That boat sailed probably 1940s. Once we beat out the Germans. They continue on here with, once you extend subcommunication, you start to see that all the books that women are reading, all the TV they're watching, all that stuff you talk about as blue pill indoctrination is actually pretty damned good. And this is something that I don't think you're ever going to see mentioned in the sphere. Like, you'll see us talk about the Disney fantasy, how, the boy tries hard, wins the princess, or the goofy man through sheer determination wins over the girl's heart. The Cosmo articles, or whatever chicks are reading now, Jezebel or whatever, 10 ways to hook a man, or 5 things to do, and they always seem like convoluted and fairly derivative, and they don't really work. And as a guy, you read that, you're like, this makes no sense. Once you start understanding the use of subtext and subcommunication, you're going to realize a lot of these things actually have a lot of truth to them, but you just haven't really seen it. Again, health at any size is a great example. Everybody sees fitness brands throwing, hefty 200-pounders into Lululemon saying, oh, wow, you're going to be your best fitness girl. And you look at that and you go, this is completely stupid. Nobody's actually going to be doing this. This makes no sense. You're getting people killed. This isn't fitness. Aren't you supposed to be talking about fitness? Then you remember, oh, it's a company, and a company wants to sell product. And the idea of a fat girl who knows she needs to lose weight, having you say, don't worry, you're not fat, everybody should love you the way you are, and you're perfect. By the way, here's some athletic wear which will give you all the benefits of fitness without having to do any of the work. It's New Year's resolutions for $69.99. Gotta work well. But then you see the subtext and you see it's worth it. Makes perfect sense. That's exactly what you do. You tell people what they want to hear, and then the people reward that fixing of their insecurity by engaging in whatever it is you drive them to. It's marketing 101. The one line that I really like that he put on here, by the way, it's once you start understanding the idea of subtext, the idea of power games, you start learning to pay attention to how a girl says what she says, and more importantly, what's left unsaid. For a lot of guys, you're going to see a ton of videos, tons of views talking about women say this, but they want that. They say they want a nice man, but they date a bad boy. They say height doesn't matter, but they only date guys 6 feet tall. Again, a lot of times when girls say things, it's just reputation management, and then you understand how she says it. In other words, why she's saying it, where she's saying it, and what's left unsaid. And you'll start to see all these things make perfect sense. It's just social signaling for PR management for chicks, and reputation management for women is probably one of their most important things. I actually write this in my book. The only thing more important than hot chicks having hot sex with cool dudes is making sure her friends don't think she likes any of that. Setting the stage. For married guys, she's the boss. Now, fundamentally, you're going to see this type of situation is pretty alarming because in real world experience with men and women, most of the men that talk about happy wife, happy life, or I'm so lucky that she picked me, tend to be less than delighted with their marriages. At the same time, these men kind of feel powerless, so they also suspect, quite correctly, that their wives don't respect them, and they continue on with these covert contracts. I'm going to keep doing nice things for her, I'm going to keep showing that I'm better than the other guy, and she's going to start treating me like crap. It's learned helplessness. And learned helplessness, if you don't know, is an old humanist B.F. Skinner experiment where they had animals in cages, and they would electrify the cages. Some of the cages were open, some were closed. The ones that were open, the animals just ran out because I'm like, I'm not putting up with this. The ones that were closed, the animals would fight and scream, and then eventually kind of accept it. And then every time they'd get shocked, they'd just whimper in pain and sit there. Now, that's kind of horrible enough, but here's the thing that made it work. They found out with those same group, when they opened the cages and they electrified them again, they didn't try to escape. And that's learned helplessness. Happy life, happy wife is the male masculine equivalent of a dog getting electrified in a cage with the door open. And again, opening a guy's eyes to this kind of stuff is really important, and I'd say the main thrust of the book. So you take any one of these happy life, happy wife guys, ask them, hey, how's sex with the wife? And they'll most likely give you answers ranging from sex, what's that? To a hostile, that's none of your effing business. So in these guys' experience, they've rarely met a man who smiles and says, she treats me well. Now, full disclosure here, my girl, she treats me well. Single guys too, though, can get a benefit from this kind of thing. While you may have experienced the pain that comes from when you love your girlfriend so much and would do anything to please her, and yet the harder you try, the more distant she gets, this can be extremely frustrating for a man. Again, for most guys, they keep treating things like dates as a job interview as opposed to a vetting of a girl, an initial vetting, because you know I'm not a fan of vetting. When you walk up and assume that the girl is the one you need to please in order to get affection or sex out of it, you're automatically going to get weeded out because 90% of guys do that. And like I said about commodity goods, that's the Walmart purse way of running things. You're not trying to be the Walmart purse, you're trying to be the Louis Vuitton. Motivations. Each of us consider it most important to unconditionally love women for who women are rather than those we would naively wish them to be. I would say the motivations of this book and the reason why it's not for everybody is that line summed right up. Now, first time I read it, when I first read the book, I thought, what's this unconditional love of woman crap? I didn't like it. I didn't like the idea of it. Like, what about, chicks that screwed you over? What about hookers? What about that girl that got pregnant by your dad? Like, no, not those chicks. But again, subtext, you kind of read it through. What he's saying is not unconditionally to love women. It's that unconditionally to accept women for who they are and not who you want them to be. I wish I could attribute this quote. I want to say it's Nietzsche, but it's probably not, where Meeting a girl will have you project the perfect image of a woman onto her, and there's nothing she can do but disappoint you. That's kind of the wrong way to frame it. In this case, you know exactly what you're looking up for. You don't walk up with a preconceived notion of the woman of Willendorf, or some kind of magical sex goddess, or some BPD hooker that's going to steal half of your resources. I don't know why you don't just say money in your house. You have to say resources, but whatever. Autism, am I right? The point is, you walk up, you see a woman for what she is. A flawed meatbag, same as guys, but different. They ended off with how to read this book. And I think this is important, not just for this book, but for almost anything red pill we talk about. They quote, "The framework we present is based on biological and evolutionary principles, but we don't insist on causality. These principles simply provide a coherent structure upon which to hang our experience with women and our observations of women's behavior." Again, praxeology. None of this is meant to be taken as serious fact, and you're going to see this is the easiest argument that people get thrown into. If you don't know, there's a concept called alpha within the red pill, which is things that guys do that build desire and sexual attractiveness. But then a lot of people hear that and they're thinking like alpha is in the pack leader. And then they start arguing whether humans are wolves or humans are gorillas or bonobos. And then you get into this weird scientific argument that nobody ever learns from. And it's just a giant circle jerk minus the money shot at the end. Ignore all that crap. Ignore everybody's logical and rational and autistic points because none of it matters. All this is here is a giant red box full of crescent wrenches, full of monkey wrenches, full of hammers, full of saws, full of levels and everything. Depending on what you need to do, some of it may be useful, some of it may not be useful. But so long as you know what you're going to be building, you will know which tools will help you, and you will understand that these weren't just built by some guy in a laboratory. Some guy who had to build his own house built this tool, and the stuff that worked, they threw in the box. The stuff that didn't work, they threw it away. And so don't just take this book in that way. Take everything on all these red pill channels. Everything from Rollo Tomasi, everything from Rich Cooper, everything from myself, everything from Modern Life John, Troy Francis, Myron, the lot of us. Understand it's not scientific rigor. It's just replication. If I do this, can I have that same result? Sounds good. So thanks for sticking around. We'll catch you guys on the next episode. Don't forget, if you want to hear more about this on a more one-to-one personal level, we got Patreon. Link is in the description. I'll catch you guys on the next one.